Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. You have successfully reached the Larkspur Community Housing Element Update workshop. We will be using all the technology available in front of you today. If you look in the bottom center of your screen, you will find a chat icon, a Q&A icon. You can raise your hand and you can see a live transcript. Please feel free to utilize all those functions. We will not be looking in the chat for questions. We are asking you please put them in the Q&A box, as we'll be able to focus our attention there. And I guess with no further ado, I see a few more people are joining us. So I'm going to talk very slowly as I hand it over to our host today, Andy Flower from EMC Planning. Andy, to you.
Thank you, Tamala. We welcome everybody. We're so glad you made time to share your evening with us to learn a little bit more about this housing element update. I'm going to share my screen and begin our presentation. Tamala, does it look like we've slowed down in the numbers of people coming in, rolling in? I see a thumbs up from Rachel. We'll get to some introductions here in a minute so everybody can know a little more about these names that I'm calling out. We are EMC Planning Group, and we are the consultants hired on by the City of Larkspur to carry out this 6th cycle housing element update. And this is our first community workshop. So welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here. This also coincides with a steering committee roll call. And this is necessary because we want to be sure that we are in keeping with the Brown Act. And we also wanted to make sure that all 4 of these gentlemen are available this evening to participate. Allison, can we have a roll call, please?
Committee Member Haroff?
Yes, I'm here.
Committee Member Paulson?
Here.
Committee Member Wagstaff?
Here.
Committee Member Kunzler?
Here.
Thank you, Allison. A little bit about our team. Again, we are EMC Planning Group. I'm Andy Flower, Principal Planner at EMC. Lauren Herr is on board, Associate Planner. Tamala Fish, our Zoom Coordinator. We've got Lee Robinson from Be the Diversity. And they are our Equity Educator. Kristen Masters and Chris Kiefer from Santa Cruz Nonviolent Communication. David Masonton, ELS Architecture and Urban Design. And Rachel Kane from More Sky, Less Ceiling. Our agenda this evening, we're going to make this as interactive as possible. We recognize there's a lot of meeting fatigue out there, and we want to help this be as engaging as we can. We're going to start off with just a quick dive into the housing element update to help you understand what it is and get everybody on the same page for where we're going next. We're going to focus on the importance of equity, which is very important for this 6th cycle housing element update, and have a short Q&A session following that. We'll then move on to Larkspur's strategy for sites with an overview and ways to provide feedback. Tonight, one of the ways we'll be asking you to provide feedback is with a mapping exercise, and that's available on our website. So we'll be reminding of that many times with the chat function. At the end, we're devoting quite a bit of time to the Q&A session. We want to make sure this feels a lot different from a council meeting. We will be responsive to the questions that are raised, and we'll be gathering all of these comments, and we shall begin. Our goal this evening is to create a common understanding. Pamela, if you can help me out a little bit with the Zoom logistics.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. So today you can call in via phone, which is 1-669-900-6833. And then you would enter our webinar ID when prompted. The webinar ID is 930-3654-2367. I believe this information is also on the website. During the live Q&A session, you should press *9 if you are calling in on the phone to raise your hand, and *6 to unmute or mute yourself if you're calling in from the phone.
Thank you, Tamala.
And next, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I see we have a lot of new attendees here, we are going to be fully using the icons in the bottom of your Zoom box. So let's acquaint you with them now. The first is the Q&A icon. As an attendee, you may submit questions at any time throughout this webinar. Please do. Panelists may reply to your question directly in this Q&A box or wait to answer it live during one of our Q&A sessions. We will also be using the raise hand function. Panelists will ask attendees to raise their hand at certain times in response throughout the presentation, and you can click the raise hand button. Later on, attendees can also use the raise hand tool to ask questions during the live Q&A session. And chat. Please do not use the chat feature to send messages. It's hard for us to focus on so many things. We are going to use it to send information to you. Please do submit your questions using the Q&A tool. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear there. We will be sharing all those important links via chat. We don't want them to get underneath a lot of different questions. And we are featuring live transcript in today's meeting. Click the live transcript button for this feature. Transcription will be translated into Spanish later. It will not be available on this workshop. So sorry about that if you're waiting for that. Notifications will be sent out when both videos are available on the livinglarkspur.com website. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamala. And here we'll begin with our overview of the housing element update. We're going to start off with a poll. We'd like to know, how confident do you feel today about your knowledge of the housing element update process?
Oh, I see we have quite a few people answering. That's wonderful. If you cannot find it for some reason, maybe hit escape if your whole screen is hiding it. And somewhere you will see a little white box and it's a poll quiz. And it has a question: how confident do you feel about your knowledge of the housing element update process? And I do believe we're running to a close. You have 3 more seconds to answer. 1, or rather 3, 2, 1, and we are ending the poll.
Thank you, Tamala. We see that there's a little over half of you that are unsure, and I don't blame you. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of new things coming in with this 6th cycle housing element. We're going to do our best to give an overview. One of the things we're discovering is it's just as important to curate the information shared as it is to gather it. So we don't want to bring a fire hose of information to you today. We're going to bring it in as a trickle, and then we'll guide you to our website where there'll be a little more information. And then as time goes on, we will continue to seed the website with more and more useful information as our process continues on. So those of you who are confident, we're great. We're so lucky to have you on board with us, because we want to work with the knowledge that you have and that you bring. There's so much newness that we want to be clear that we are not overconfident about our knowledge. We recognize that a lot of what will make this housing element update be best for Larkspur is if we're listening actively to what the community has to share with us. So please know that we are all ears here. And somewhat confident. We hope to build confidence throughout today's process and through this entire update period. So let's start with the basics. What is a housing element? A housing element is part of the general plan. It's a visionary yet detailed policy document. It's required by state law to be updated every 8 years, and that's more frequently than your general plan. And Larkspur currently is in the process of updating the general plan. So we'll be making sure that those documents are all consistent with one another. So we're setting the stage to accommodate existing and projected future housing needs for people of all income groups. We will be selecting sites where new housing should go. We're looking for enabling capacity for housing to be built. We're also mandated to select how many units could be built on each of the potential sites that we come up with, and to outline programs and policies to encourage development. It's important to understand that the city of Larkspur doesn't build the housing, unlike some larger cities that may. Instead, the housing element update process is an opportunity for us to make sure that there's enough capacity for those who can and may build housing in the future, that it's possible, that there's a predictable path to be able to do that. So the key components of the housing element will be incorporating an analysis of housing need, evaluation of constraints, identification of sites, and then we'll be bringing forward to the public a housing plan with goals, policies, programs, and quantified objectives. With this sixth cycle housing element update, there's also a special focus on affirmatively furthering fair housing. It's also understood as AB 686 and public engagement. We want to make sure that this is radically inclusive, that anyone who wants to be a part of this or who would be impacted by how this policy document would be drafted, either those who currently live in Larkspur, who would like to live in Larkspur, that they can participate. The general roles for every jurisdiction, it takes problem solving as a team. And it includes future neighbors, current neighbors, policymakers of several scales, including local decision makers like your planning and planning commission and city council. The regional decision makers, we know that, and we'll get to that in a little bit, Association of Bay Area Governments, and the state, Housing and Community Development. The policy that we create together will affect the relationship between city staff and developers. So the roles specific to the city of Larkspur, we at EMC Planning Group are working closely with both city staff and the steering committee, and encouraging public engagement and feedback at every stage, as we then bring that information through the Planning Commission, City Council, and ultimately to HCD to request for certification. So I may have already mentioned the word or the phrase RHNA. It's an acronym, and it stands for Regional Housing Needs Allocation. This is the number of homes allocated between now and between 2023 and 2031 at varying affordability levels. This has been assigned to the city of Larkspur by ABAG, or the Bay Area region, and Bay Area, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So the RHNA for Larkspur's sixth cycle housing element, the total is 979 units. And among that number of units that we need to allocate for, you can see that approximately 30% of it would need to be understood as capable of very low income housing being built there. 17% or 168 units of low income housing, 14.8% moderate income, and 375 units of above moderate income. The consequences of non-compliance for enabling this capacity with our housing policy has grown in its list. So there would be a limited access to state funding for not only housing related things, but also for transportation. There's the potential for lawsuits, not only from the state, but also from the public at large and housing advocates. There could be court mandated compliance as a consequence, and legal fees could be incurred. There could also be court imposed fines. This would be, this list sort of builds in its intensity, so that the most intense consequence that is now a part of the enforcement that HCD has at its reach is receivership, and that would be suspension of local control on building matters entirely and court approval of housing developments. We want to help you avoid all of this. We want to help you get to the place where we get a certifiable housing element into HCD's hands in a timely manner and with all zoning that may be required along with that. So our general process is that we're working together, as I mentioned, with the steering committee. And then we have community workshops like today, our data collection, analysis, housing sites inventory, and HCD check-in. These are all happening concurrently, and it will be an ongoing process. We have an equity advisor through the county, and her name is Veronica Tam. She's had experience with many housing elements in Southern California. So she's on the cutting edge of understanding how we can bring this forward. And this is just a short list of the review process from the steering committee. We then bring the draft housing element. One of the other new laws is that we must bring that to the public within a 30-day review period before it goes to HCD for an early review. Their review then is a 90-day period. And in the fall, we hope to bring to you a final housing element for Planning Commission recommendation to City Council, and then we bring it to HCD. This feels like a long list, but we know we can get through it together. And throughout this process, there will be many, many ways for the public to be engaged. And tonight is just the beginning stage of that. So here's a visual of the timeline. And you can see that right now we're talking about a sites inventory. Throughout the spring, we'll be moving towards policy development. And we hope this summer to have a draft available to the public for review. And then for it to also be reviewed by HCD so that we can make the January 2023 deadline here in Larkspur. So leading with equity, I want to bring on our amazing team. We've got Lee Robinson, Kristen Masters, and behind the scenes, we've got Chris Kiefer. And I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. So hello, everyone. Welcome. It's fantastic to be here with you all, and we're really excited about these conversations that we're going to have. So next up, my colleagues and I want to talk a little bit about leading with equity and why. And you may be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, what is equity? What do you mean by equity? On the next slide, I want to talk to you all about this image. I really love to use this image when I'm talking about equity. And maybe some of you all have seen it, maybe some of you all have not. It's all good. So in this image, we have equality versus equity, okay? So we have these folks at a ball game, right? All three folks are at a ball game watching this amazing game, all right? The boxes are distributed differently, right? So on the left side, all the boxes are the same, okay? So on the far left, that guy can totally see the game. He can see everything that's happening. He has no obstruction, right? The middle, this person can see the game too. You know, he's on the fence, but he can also see the game. So the far right, this little person, this young person can't see the game at all, right? Okay, so that's equality. That's all the boxes are the same. Now on the right side, we have equity, where the boxes are distributed differently. On the far left, there's no box and he can still see the game, right? The middle has one box still, and that person can still see the game as well. Now on the far right, the person has two boxes now, and this person can now see the game, okay? This person can now experience what the others are experiencing, watching the game, enjoying the environment, enjoying the situation, all right? So the difference is equity is based on need and not on the one size fits all, right? Now, folks may be thinking, wait a minute, but isn't equality a better fit? Isn't it fair if everyone gets the same amount? That might make some sense, but as you all can see here, fairness isn't always the best fit. We see that in this scenario, okay? Now, we get to explore the housing element update through an equity lens. And what does that mean? It means that we have an opportunity to be specific about what the needs are, what people's personal needs are and circumstances are, and they're gonna look very different. Okay, we get to hear voices that may not have been heard in the past, and we get to seek out those voices and work towards addressing those needs. Also, we get to navigate some of those barriers to address those needs. And this is where it becomes a little challenging, right? When we're kind of addressing some of those barriers, we may be having some challenging conversations, right? About race and various identities, histories, and some of the stuff that's kind of challenging to look at sometimes, right? So when we're talking about equity, we're talking about being more engaged. And now I want to hand it off to my colleague, Kristen, who is going to do another live poll with you all.
So on the next slide, one of the relationships around equity is that of trust. So we want to see with you answering this poll, how much you actually trust that your voice will be heard in this process. This is essential. We want to build this trust during the course of our community meetings and with your access to the website and lots of ways that we want to hear you, but we want to find out what that is right now. So how much trust? You'll see the poll there. I fully trust my voice will be heard. I have some concerns. I have significant concerns, or I don't trust it at all. And Tamala is
I see we have about 60% of the people have participated. If you're one of the few that hasn't, we would love to know your answer to this, and it is anonymous. You have about 3 more seconds. Please do tell us, how much do you trust that your voice will be heard in this process? And I see that worked. We did have a few more, and I will be ending the poll in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you for your willingness to tell us that. So we're seeing that about 35% are feeling like they fully trust that their voice will be heard, and 47% have some concern or significant concerns, and 18% don't trust it at all yet. And I say yet because I really sincerely think our team wants to build that sense of trust in you, that your concerns, that the things that you're trying to protect will be listened to, will be taken into account during this. Okay, and the next slide.
All right. Thank you so much, Kristen. So this question here, why does Larkspur need to plan for more housing? All right. And this is the piece around caring, okay? Because Larkspur is a community that cares, right? There are many ways to care. We can care for our neighbors. We can care for our communities. And on the slide, we see caring for our neighbors, ensuring that our fellow residents can continue to live here, right? Also caring for our community. Become a more inclusive Larkspur by creating housing opportunities for all community members. And that's where we get to see our communities thrive, right? We get to see our residents in our communities. We get to see this beautiful community that's thriving and people are able to live there and have this experience and call that place home, right? So we also have 2 other major components in place to help guide us when we're talking about the caring piece. And my colleague Andy is going to talk a little bit more about those on the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Lee. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with everyone the precise language of the law. So this new legislation, AB 686, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, is to take meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on specific protected characteristics. So our goals for AFFH, specific to the housing element, we're going to attempt to address significant disparities in housing needs and in access to opportunity, replace segregated living patterns with truly integrated and balanced living patterns, and foster and maintain compliance with civil rights and fair housing law. This is very important to HCD. What we've learned is that more than 70% of those in Southern California who have attempted to become certified, they've received revision request letters, primarily based on not attending to this new requirement. We're going to be trying on new things, and we're going to be in this together. Lee?
Great. Yeah, thank you. And I want us to really thinking about, you know, the last slide that we saw. We come back here to this caring slide, right? Because there were 3 major goals on that last slide, and those goals, those are embedded in our potential for empathy, for compassion, for care, right? For creating environments, for ensuring that we're caring for our neighbors and caring for our community as a whole. So right back to this idea of caring, and by exploring equity, we are having an opportunity to find out what the needs are of our neighbors and communities. We also get to hear these needs from our neighbors and communities and each other. And most importantly, our neighbors, our communities, and each other, we get to feel heard. And that's the biggest piece of the work that we're doing, right? And when I say the engagement, we get in there, we get to have these conversations, and they might not feel so great. It might be scary, it might be challenging, it might be hard to hear things and see things, but like Andy said, we're gonna get through it together, we're gonna do this work together, okay? So again, doing a deeper dive into equity, it can be difficult, but we're here to do that. And on the other side of those tough conversations and those things that might be challenging, we find an inclusive, thriving community, okay? I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Kristen, who has a few other questions and thoughts as we move into our Q&A.
Yeah, because we are in this place where we can't actually get a feel necessarily for who you are. I'm going to ask a few questions, and you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen in order to vote. It's we don't know who's saying what, but it gives us a sense of who's out there. And it kind of leans into your own exploration and sharing around this caring for yourself, for your neighbors and your community. So my first question is, are you now or have you had housing insecurity that impacts your quality of life? Are you now or have you had housing insecurity that impacts your quality of life? So you can use the raise hand feature, and we might get a little bit of a read of whether that's true for you. And I'll ask Tamala if that comes through. I'm not seeing anything
Yes, so I do see we have the numbers actually climbing a little bit, but we have at least 15 people so far.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tamala. So I just want to say that is a real and huge impact in someone's life, to have housing insecurity, to have had it or to have it now. And as we look at this housing element, we want to be aware and sensitive to that. The second question, you can raise your hand if you hold concern for friends, for family, for service providers, for people who are connected in your life that can't find or afford local housing. We're specifically looking at Larkspur, of course, but it is a region. So if you hold concern for family, friends, for service providers that you have a sense can't find or afford local housing. And again, using the raise hand function so that we get a sense of a little bit of how
And
this
I do see the numbers raising. I just would like to take the opportunity, I'm sorry to interrupt you, to remind people that if you are hearing impaired, you can click on the closed caption live transcript and you can see what we are saying. So thank you. And by that is the raised hand function. And I do see we actually have slightly more people who are concerned.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tamala, for reading this for us. And my third question, to come from a slightly different place, is if you're here on this housing element call and you hold concern about density and the impact on your quality of life as a result of density, as a result of, for instance, traffic, but there might be other pieces that are there for you that, and we're just kind of trying to get a sense of where your concerns are and how you're arriving here. So you can raise hand if density is a particular concern for you.
It looks like actually our number is stabilizing, and it's approximately seven people.
Okay, wonderful. So you will get a chance, obviously, in the Q&A and in other places to be able to more specifically say what your concerns are. But thank you for giving us a little bit of a read so that we know something about what your care for yourself, your neighbors, and your community looks like. Okay. So we're moving into a question and answer session, and I know that there are some Q&As. I'm going to pull them up that have already been submitted, and we are kind of sorting these in some ways so that we can.
While you do that, Kristen, I'm wondering, Lee, can you maybe speak a little bit about the process that that we're going to be enacting with the Q&As as far as the receiving?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be answering questions, and we whenever we're asking questions or answering questions, we want to make sure that we give an opportunity to other folks can raise your hands. If you also share the question that's being asked, we've got questions that are coming in. We'll also have some live questions, and myself and Kristen will be working to pull those questions through, make sure that those questions get asked, make sure that you feel like you've been heard. So there will be a little bit of a beat in there where you'll ask your question and we may make some sort of comment as that question is getting to whoever the question is for. But we really want to encourage you all to, if you hear a question that's asked and you're like, I can resonate with that, to use the raise hand and just show us in some way that, you know, that might not be your question, but that's something that you can resonate with and maybe you've experienced and you know, something that's hitting home for you as well.
Okay. And I'll just transparently say that we're sorting through the questions, and some of these are being answered directly, and some of them are going to be asked. So I will not necessarily ask them in order that they were submitted, because some of them are being answered in a typed manner. But I will ask, let's see.
And Kristen, this is Lauren, just to chime in. I was able to send you a list over the direct chat if you're able to access that.
Okay, great.
Hopefully that will help.
Yeah, thank you. So let me ask this question, and my guess is it's for Andy, but you will be able to tell. The city of Larkspur, the county, and other municipal governments administratively appealed our respective RENA assessments. The appeals were denied by ABAG. What further rights do cities and counties have under current law to obtain relief if necessary from the court?
So if I understand the question correctly, that it sounds like whether or not the question is whether or not there would be an opportunity to appeal again, or that there would maybe be, I am hearing the word relief, but I'm guessing that what they're asking for is to minimize the allocated number of units. And it has become final as far as the allocation. So the appeal was the end of that process. Some cities have further tried to sue HCD, but that has not been successful in Southern California. That completes that answer.
Great. So this question, what is low income and what is moderate income? Can you provide what the current AMA number is for very low income, etc.? And if this number changes after the report is filed, can the numbers or housing units be adjusted? So I'm guessing that people want some sense of how these terms translate in real life and in this process.
Yes, we do have that chart available from our prior presentation. And so that should be found on our website. I don't have it at my fingertips right at this moment, but we can certainly do a follow-on from this Q&A and make sure that it's easy for folks to find again. And as far as the second part of that question, yes, it's true that these are relative numbers. So it's so that it will be adjusted over time as the AMI shifts. So will the proportion for those according to the levels of affordability. Thank you.
Great. Another question, what are the repercussions if the units aren't built during the next cycle? Can you talk a little bit about that, Andy?
Yeah, it's we try to stay away from breaking out a crystal ball in that we don't know exactly what HCD's consequences might be as they round the corner 8 years from now for their 7th cycle housing element update. But currently there are we at this point in time just need to show that we can that there's the capacity for constructing these 979 units of housing.
Great.
I can jump in on one of these if you
Sure.
Okay, so this question is, does this meeting only apply to homeowners or apartment dwellers? I live in Skylark, which has just been sold to a large corporation. We are all in a panic as to find an affordable place to live. And as we prepare to hand this question off to someone to answer, I just wanted to acknowledge something that was said in this question, the panic around finding the affordable place to live. I wanted to acknowledge that and acknowledge that that feels really hard to me. I can tell in the question that there's panic there. And anyone else who is experiencing this, if that's something that resonates with you as well, go ahead and raise your hand, but I really appreciate that question around the panic in the comments. So I think that we've got someone answering that question.
I can help answer that question. And I do see we've got around 9 participants raising their hand on that. And that's hard to hear. I hope our efforts through this process can help a lot of folks who are in that position find relief. I only wish it could be faster, but this is the policymaking part of the process. So one aspect to that means that the public participation has the strongest weight. So for instance, in this situation, if we understand what's happening here, and as we move into the policy discussions, there may be policies that could help forestall, mitigate, or assist people who are in this kind of situation. So that is all something that will be discussed in our second wave. Today we are talking mostly about sites specifically, but please keep tuned in and share your story and help us to write a set of policies that are reflective of the needs for your community.
Okay. Here's a question on enforcement, which is something that often makes people nervous at whatever level they happen to be sitting in. On enforcement issues, most, if not all, of the remedies you suggest would require the state to sue us. Is that right? Can you say a little bit about that process?
Well, we hope that that isn't a discussion that ever gets talked about for the city of Larkspur. As I mentioned on that slide there, with one of the bullet points, it does leave it to be not in compliance with HCD, leaves a jurisdiction open to legislation or open to legal action, not only from the state, but also from the public at large or housing advocacy groups. So the legal consequences are not only from the state, and the consequences that may be borne by the state, we're still learning about the full scope, breadth, and lineage of how those actions may be enacted. It's all very new.
Mhm. Okay. Another question about enforcement. What happens to any plan we put together if the proposed ballot initiative invalidating current state housing mandates is approved by the voters?
I'm going to make an assumption because I am familiar with with one of the initiatives that's out there right now. And the initiative that I'm aware of is specific to SB 9. And that has very little consequence to our housing element update process. And unless there's information that I'm unaware of. And I've attended many webinars and groups, but our understanding is, regardless of that initiative or a set of initiatives that might be coming through soon, the housing element update will still be required. The 6th cycle housing element is not something that is up for change through a local vote at this time.
Mhm. Okay. So that's the last question we have time for right now. Thank you, Andy, for all that you're holding, that you can actually answer those questions intelligently.
Well, there's a lot of complexities, and I'm sure I didn't touch on everything that people would like to know right now, but this is just the beginning of the conversation. And the more we hear the questions, the more we'll specialize within our website to make sure that everybody has the information that they need to be able to make informed comments. That's our role. That's our role tonight and throughout the process, is to help the public be as informed as possible so that the comments you share can truly impact and make a difference in how this policy gets rolled out. Thank you to Kristen and Lee for holding that Q&A, and we'll see you again later in this session. On to sites. Yes, thank you. So Larkspur's strategy for sites, and I'm going to welcome David Masonton from ELS, Architecture and Urban Design, who will work with me through this presentation and also through the Q&A at the end of it. So we'll begin with just helping folks out there understand what is a sites inventory. So the sites, we're going to start with the sites that have been used in a prior housing element update. So we'll be looking to those and seeing, well, what is the appetite for continuing to use those? Maybe some fall away, and meanwhile, other sites have been recognized through this analysis process, and we'll be looking for sites to accommodate low and very low income RHNA. We'll be considering constraints, including the safety element concerns. We'll be doing a capacity analysis. We've already begun that. And we'll be looking to non-vacant sites, those sites that may be ripe for redevelopment, or particularly that may be aligned with ways in which the community would like to refresh their city. So in the end, we'll be doing a determination of adequate sites. So our strategies in identifying the additional sites, it may well be that changes to the general plan might be necessary, and or rezoning, or adopting policies and programs specifically to incentivize certain sites to be developed. So this is another opportunity. We'd love to hear from property owners out there. If you've decided to join us tonight, whether you're a single family homeowner or an owner of a commercial site, please raise your hand and give us an idea that you're listening. You matter a lot to this process. We're hearing a lot about how much is placed this go round with HCD, about the reasonableness of selecting sites. And that means that if we were to select a site, if it's obvious that the property owner has no interest in developing that site, that makes a difference, particularly for those sites that are being reused, that have been used in the prior housing element cycle, and for those sites that maybe have long-term leases. And so I see we have 3 participants that have raised their hands. 4, okay, we're up to 6, 7, that's great. And we have a property owner interest form on our website. If you haven't received notice about that, please know that that is available for you to throw your hat in the ring and help us know that you have whether or not you have an intention to make a difference in this housing element update. So this is an overview of our map. We've sectioned off the city into some different neighborhoods. We worked closely with Neil Toft as he was development director before he moved on. And we've got 7 different distinct areas. We've got North Magnolia, Green Brae, which includes sort of the Bon Air neighborhood. We've got Central Larkspur, downtown, Larkspur Landing, Cost Plus Plaza, and a site that's within your sphere of influence, but is not yet annexed, which is the San Quentin site. We'll talk more about that later. I want to preface this by letting you know that we've probably got around 400% right here of the housing that we need within these sites that we see as being developable in the eyes of ABAG and HCD as a first step. And when we go through this exercise, we want to make it clear that we're not suggesting that every single one of these sites needs to be developed in the near future. Instead, we're bringing to you all sites that could conceivably be on the table that would be considered reasonable opportunity sites through HCD. And now we're bringing them to you because we want to hear from the public, what are your preferences? We have some ideas and some analysis that we'll share. We'll also be pointing out, we can't go through every site tonight, but we'll be pointing out some of the things we want to make sure don't get misunderstood, things that could easily confuse the audience rather than inform. And we're here tonight to help inform you. From that, we're asking you to inform us. So each and every site that we have selected and numbered, and within our mapping program that we'll be sharing with you soon, we have corresponding areas on our website where you can give us some feedback. You can let us know what you think about the site being selected and included, and then help us understand why you feel that way about each general site. Sometimes the site is one individual parcel, and sometimes it's groups of parcels. And this is just our initial scoping. From here, we'll get into the weeds about specific sites. So David, would you like to say hello and give a little idea?
I'm excited to be part of this process. And I think the one thing I wanted to add to that was that the HCD guidelines make sites that are considered developable between 1/2 acre in size and 10 acres in size. So that partly plays into the sites that we'll be showing tonight. But this is just really an attempt to get sites out in front of the public, just to try to get some initial comment.
Thank you, David. And as I mentioned, we're not going site by site, but we'll bring up some high points. And in this case, the Masonic Center, we've heard that there might be an interest with that site, and we understand that there's already an interest with 1A, and I believe that's already going through a review process. But we'd love to hear from the community about each of these sites, and perhaps you have some density ideas that might be different than what's on the books now. So this is also part of the North Magnolia area. And this one we're bringing to your attention because we want to make it clear that even though graphically it may look like we're recommending that the entire site be developed, and that is not at all what we would suggest. We would suggest a lot line adjustment that would enable the possibility for development to occur on in the flat area of this site and towards the road, so that it would be less impactful to the environment. David, did you want to add to this at all?
No, I think this one, when you look at some of the topography there, clearly it's not really buildable outside of the circle that's been drawn.
And we understand too, there's a lot of passion for this site, and there's horse trails that take you all the way to the beach. That's pretty special. In no way are we suggesting that should be diminished. We've got site 2C here, and again, we're not recommending that the whole site be developed. Instead, it would just be the idea that maybe the parking lot area could be developed to still allow for parking, but maybe there would be housing above that. And David, you might want to speak to some feasibility concepts for both 2C and 2F.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is about trying to find opportunities that are, in places that maybe you don't think about because they're in a parking lot of another parcel. But I think when you look at these types of parcels, there is great opportunity. In 2F, it's that existing office park. Those buildings typically would not be that convertible to residential, but the floor plate depth and size of them actually makes them, it could be possible to make them into residential units. It would be, you'd have to sink some capital into actually bringing utilities and all of the water up into the building. But it's in a beautiful location and there is potential there.
Thank you, David. And 2G is an odd-shaped parcel. It's owned by the city. And we included that site because there is an opportunity in that the lease is set to expire within this 8-year cycle. So we want to hear from the community. Where are your priorities? And for the Larkspur Landing, we want to make it clear that for 3D, it is only the Bed Bath & Beyond site. It's not the whole of the shopping center. We both love that shopping center personally.
Well, I love the shopping center too. And I think for all the sites you see on this page, there's just tremendous opportunity because it's so accessible to the ferry and to this amazing amenity that's the Marin County Mart. I think, putting housing here makes all the sense in the world in terms of just access to everything.
And I do want to clarify, we did hear from property owner at 3A, and they want to make it clear that the office buildings that are there now, that would not be considered for redevelopment. Instead, it would only be the parking lot area surrounding it. We've included those kinds of notes within the website. So before you comment, you can see a few of the notes that have been gathered from city staff, from EMC staff, but we really want to be informed by the community. So we look forward to hearing your comments. So Central Larkspur, there's a lot of opportunity here, right, David?
It's a great opportunity. That Safeway store, Safeway has a history of doing denser redevelopments where they include housing. I think there's huge opportunity there. The land is fairly level. The sites are large enough on both sides of the road to accommodate a significant number of units, and it's pretty walkable too. So I think both these sites, or all these sites, are really excellent examples.
And I think you mentioned Safeway, and I gave you that bad information. I think it's actually Lucky's. I've discovered since then.
Well, Lucky's, Albertsons, and Safeway are all owned by the same corporate entity. So it is to a certain extent. I've worked with Albertsons, which owns Lucky, and I think they would be interested in something there as well. So I mean, I think it's something that's worth talking about.
And we're aware that there's been a lot of interest in constructing on 4D, and we want to open it up to the community to see if maybe the reconstruction of the library and inclusion of a community center, if there might also be an opportunity to integrate housing, if there's public interest for that. So David, we don't really recommend downtown to get
No, I mean,
reconfigured or redeveloped.
the downtown's beautiful. You know, I don't think that we don't want to necessarily recommend this, but these are sites that fall under the HCD guidelines. But we understand that, you know, we don't want to change the character of downtown, and the size of the sites are pretty small. So it doesn't make for, you know, an easy solution. You would actually have to accumulate multiple parcels to make it work. And I think Larkspur is in the very fortunate position of having a lot of opportunity in other places that, you know, it's kind of our gut to leave downtown alone, but we want to hear from you guys, you know, in terms of how you feel about it.
Particularly because this was on the 5th cycle housing element. So it's in your housing, it's part of your general plan right now. And if instead you'd like to see the housing constructed surrounding downtown to help enliven downtown, then we'll carry that forward. We do have a couple of sites that one site that we skipped because it's recently been developed, and it's a beautiful mixed use area, and we just want to commend you for that. That actually can go a long way in our descriptions to HCD for what is possible in Larkspur. We also have in 5A, these sites are maybe a little underdeveloped for this location, but again, we want to hear from you. Cost Plus Plaza, this was a late addition to the list, and it has some great potential. It also has some constraints when it comes to climate action over time, but a lot of that can be mitigated. And do you want to speak to that a little bit, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Cost Plus site it's got a lot of area. Certainly it could hold a number of units. It is near a highway. It is on low-lying land, and we don't know over the long term what the sea level rise will be, and we don't know necessarily how the Bay Area in general and ABAG is going to handle sea level rise. So that's one of the things that we need to put in consideration with the sites that we use. You know, how viable are they for the long-term potential for housing, not just in the next 8 years?
We do know that we wouldn't want to suggest that a large proportion of the affordable housing should go in this area, which may have been something considered in the past. This is a perfect example of how we want to integrate equity concepts into determining where the affordable housing should go. And we'll have Veronica Tam at the county to also review for our list of sites and give us some guidance. And we'll be bringing that guidance forward as we winnow down this list. And this is an interesting site that also came to us late in the game, and sort of a golden opportunity in that, and we're actually calling it a pipeline project because it's a little out of our hands. And when I say our, I'm already including myself as part of Larkspur, but this is county-owned property, and it's state-owned property, and it's most likely moving forward, and it's most likely, although not absolutely positively, going to be annexed into the city of Larkspur. But if so, then that would be 230 units that you may be able to count towards your RHNA. So we're going to go ahead and assume that in our mapping program today.
And also how it's housing this walkable to Larkspur Landing and to the Marin County Mart. So, you know, again, it really checks a lot of boxes on desirability.
Yes. So our strategy with HCD programs and grants, we'll be looking to present a compliant housing element, and of course with the annual progress reports, which are due each April, and that we'll make sure that all required rezones are complete, and that the jurisdiction is compliant with all housing laws, including housing element law, no net loss law, Housing Accountability Act, Density Bonus Law, Housing Crisis Act, and Fair Housing. And in meeting these criteria, that would enable Larkspur to become a magnet for grant funding to be able to meet those low and very low housing numbers, which are almost impossible to meet without some amount of support through grants. So we're trying to sort of leapfrog Larkspur into not only just being compliant, but to sort of being an A+ applicant for certification so that we can maximize your opportunities to meet all of the criteria. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the Balancing Act, Housing Simulator, this mapping tool that we are making available to the full community. And I am going to show you here what it looks like. And now I'm going to stop sharing and then share again on a different screen so that I can show you how to open it up from the website. So here's the website, and that's what the button looks like. And we'll have Rachel Kane, who has been almost 100% of this development of this mapping program. Thank you, Rachel, for all your work on this. And this is now available to everybody, and I think you should be receiving a link to this. The only question it asks is whether or not you're a resident of Larkspur. And Rachel, you're going to help talk through some of these things, yes?
I sure am. Thanks, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
I just dropped a link to the Balancing Act Housing Simulator into the chat as well. So everybody has the availability to click on that link and look at it for themselves. First off, you want to be sure that you're viewing the simulator on a desktop device. So if you're on mobile right now, please come back when you have a bigger screen to use. So at the top of the page, you'll see the slider bar. Yep. Which represents the number of homes that Larkspur needs to make accommodations for. And as you progress through the simulation, the bubble with the number will move from the left to the right. And when it hits a positive number, the red will change to green. Your job is to allocate homes until the slider bar turns green. And it's pretty easy. We're going to show you how. So below the slider bar, you'll see a map of Larkspur. And each of the shapes on the map represents a site that we've identified for future housing opportunities, most of which Andy just went through. And you'll see the button on the top left to toggle between the two views of the map. So you can play around with those views so that you have a better idea of where each site is and if there's anything built there now. You can zoom in and you can zoom out. Thank you, Andy. Using the plus and minus buttons or the zoom functions on whatever your specific device is. Each shape also includes a label, which corresponds to the list below. So you can click the shape to see the site on the list below. So when you increase and decrease the number of housing units in each shape, the color will get darker, representing a higher density. More about that in a minute. Let's move on. Under the map, you'll see two columns of information. The column on the left is the list of housing units and the total number of housing units that the Regional Housing Needs Allocation has determined that Larkspur needs to allocate. That's RHNA. You can click the down arrow to see that list, and you can add a comment by clicking the red speech bubble in any of those rows. The column on the right is the list of sites available where more housing could be offered. You'll notice that it matches exactly the neighborhoods that Andy and David just went through. The bar chart at the top represents each area and the number of homes in each neighborhood. As you move the homes, this bar chart will change to help you see which area has a higher allocation than another. Click the down arrow in any row to see the list of sites in that neighborhood. Here, you'll see each site in each area listed on its own row. The buttons on the left will allow you to increase and decrease the number of homes in that site, as well as reset the numbers. That's a circular arrow. The map button brings you directly to that site on the map for easy reference. So you can see it on the row or you can see it on the map. The blue information button opens a window where you can read additional information, and the more details button shows the hyperlink to online resources related to the site. I've also dropped them in the chat for additional reference. And on the right, you'll see the same red speech bubble where you can leave a comment about that site. So when you're ready, dive in. Increase and decrease the number of housing units in areas that matter to you. Watch the map and the bar chart display your choices in real time. Once the red slider bar at the top of the page turns to green, your job is complete and you can scroll to the bottom and click submit to send your simulation in for consideration. And please don't forget to share this tool with your neighbors and friends, because we're really looking for a lot of input from everyone. And below the submit button, you'll see downloadable documents and additional links to more background information about all of this. Back to you, Andy.
Thank you, Rachel. That was great. I really appreciate that. I'm going to bring us back now to the presentation. Thank you for your patience. There we go. So we'll be bringing forward every single comment that we receive, whether it's on the website or within the Balancing Act Housing Simulator map. And we'll be associating those specifically with each site, with each of the decision-making bodies. And we've got all of those printable documents, which are companions to working with the mapping, so that we're finding that, and it was actually recommended to us or suggested to us by the steering committee that, you know, sometimes it's nice to be able to jot down notes before you would come to a sort of complex mapping exercise like this. So when you go to the website, you'll see on every one of our neighborhood pages, you'll see these printable documents, and these can be printed out, and this is a little bit of what they look like. We have the descriptions of the neighborhoods in both English and Spanish, and a map of the neighborhoods so that you can do this in paper form, and you can take notes ahead of time before you come back to the website, if that's the working style that works best for you. And with that, we'd like to invite our steering committee members to share with us any comments, questions, suggestions. Mayor Kevin Haroff, Gabe Paulson, Vice Mayor, Brock Wagstaff, Planning Commissioner, and Daniel Kunstler. Please know that we welcome your hands raised at this point in time.
Thank you. I found 2 of them. And you have been unmuted. Thank you.
Okay. I know that Councilmember Haroff submitted a question about sea level rise at the Cost Plus location. I was also curious of the location along the creek, the communications along the creek, whether or not there is an analogous concern, either with regard to any kind of a buffer along that shoreline, or whether or not building in that area could be problematic in any event from a SECA standpoint.
We will have our CEQA team available for any sites that veer outside of what the general plan currently is drafted to include. So if need be, we will study that under that. There's also a requirement to review for the safety element consistency. So we will be making sure that all of those things are consistent within the general plan. Thank you for your question, Daniel Kunstler. I just wanted to mention that that's who was asking that question.
Thank you.
Andy, this is Brock Wagstaff. I have a quick question. So it's going to take a developer to be interested in any of these sites. And I guess the question is, how do you motivate somebody to get involved? Because the process generally is fairly arduous, particularly for big projects.
Yes, that's a great point. It's that's where our constraints analysis comes into play as well, along with our odds refinement, objective development and design standards. So we would want to make sure that there would be a predictable pathway that is aligned with the community desires for design standards, with maybe a more streamlined process, which is what is encouraged by HCD. So one way that we would like to encourage developers and property owners to begin sort of conceiving of the idea of developing their site is just today opening the floor to this concept of radical inclusion. Let's everybody share your ideas about particular sites. And often a barrier to development throughout Marin is whether or not there is community will for that development to come to pass, particularly through the discretionary review. So community members have a big role to play. Existing neighbors can welcome future neighbors by encouraging property owners to develop particular sites. But we'll also be working closely with David Masonton and ELS to discuss feasibility analysis and for each of the sites that we narrow down to discuss. Does that answer your question, Brock? Do you have, is there a follow-on?
No, I think that sort of answers my question. I think it's such an expensive process to go through. And I think what you're doing now, which is to find out which sites are most likely, will be helpful to somebody interested in actually developing it.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, go.
I was
David,
just going to say, from a developer standpoint, because I work with a number of developers, a clear path from the city is one really helpful component that a city can provide, because so often it is a barrier. I think what Andy mentioned, community support also, but we'll have to look at individual sites as they relate to, what the zoning is for the site, for setbacks and density, and is it even feasible or allowed to put a certain number of units on the site, because that may be an impediment for a number of owners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is Daniel again. I was just wondering what methodology you might use in order to integrate circulation and parking into your analysis of the most likely sites to include in the housing element.
Well, the CEQA portion will include the traffic element to it. If we looked at individual sites, we can, make decisions through quick studies about whether there's adequate land for surface parking, et cetera. I think what you've touched on is a really significant issue about any development when it is how you handle the parking. And the cost of obviously structured parking is just too great. So it is a real puzzle about how you can fit the number of units that you want to develop with the number of required parking spaces. And that has caused a lot of cities to go back and actually look at the parking that is required under zoning code and maybe revisit that as an option to allow different types of development forms.
Right, because
So this is Kevin. When you say revisit, most of the revisiting that seems to have been occurring is to eliminate requirements for existing requirements for parking. So we build houses and then we take away opportunities for people to park their cars. I'm not quite sure how that works.
Yeah, certainly in urban settings, in San Francisco, Oakland, that it definitely is the case. Outside of those areas, cities are looking at different ways to handle parking. Whether it be unbundled from the actual unit, whether a shared parking is allowed because you have two uses that park at different times. Maybe it's 1.5 spaces per unit rather than 2 or 3. So there's some different sorts of approaches that kind of can reshape the way that parking is looked at. Certainly in a place like Larkspur, you've got good public transit, but it is a place where a lot of people need cars. So I don't think that eliminating parking altogether is the solution, but I think there's ways that you can think about it from a codes and city standpoint that can give a little boost to the potential for development.
So the other thing I wanted to, because maybe I misheard, because I had to step out for a moment. But you mentioned CEQA, that the circulation, those kinds of issues would be addressed in the context of the CEQA process. But the reality is that the current batch of state bills that have been passed kind of fundamentally eliminate the ability to utilize CEQA to analyze these issues. So how is that really going to be helpful?
Well, I'll probably
if CEQA is not available, CEQA is not going to be a help.
But CEQA is required for this process, and part of the CEQA process, and Andy, you can speak better to this, is the traffic, understanding the traffic impact for an area.
And I can also say that our CEQA team is working with several different cities throughout Marin. So there's a concerted effort to think regionally about some of these ideas as well. So we'll be looking at specific sites, particularly if there's any concept of maybe rezoning or increasing density opportunities. If so, then we'll be pairing that with an analysis on a site-specific basis, particularly if we're also pairing that with discussions about objective development and design standards.
Okay.
I have one other question, which has to do with sea level rise, because some of the sites that you've looked at, for instance, South Alicio Drive already floods if there's a king tide. And it seems like we're going to have to make this all work. If we're going to use some of these sites, we're going to have to integrate with, what do we do? How does it work? Do you have barriers, or do you raise the land itself? But some sites are not actually going to work until that's dealt with.
And just to follow on with that, Brock, I actually raised a question specifically with respect to the cost plus property. That's a very low lying property, and sea level rise is a fact. Climate change is a fact, and none of that seems to be taken into consideration in the development and imposition of these current housing requirements. So if we build housing on a property that will be inundated within the next 20 to 30 years, is that really a responsible planning approach?
Well, I think our goal is to try to identify some of those sites, because I'm in agreement with you that we really have to look carefully at where sea level rise will be and be responsible about it. On sites that are sloped or sites that are close to where we think sea level rise is, there's always the potential that you could do parking underneath and put the housing over. So there's, in Massachusetts, it's called a velocity zone, but it's where the water can go in the event of a king tide or surge event. But I think we have to think about all the sites in relation to storm surge and sea level rise, because I don't think it would be responsible to, plan housing in places that would be deeply affected by that. Right.
So just a follow-on question on that, in terms of planning, you mentioned a couple of potential mitigation approaches that I think primarily would deal with intermittent flooding as opposed to just overall sea level rise. Mm-hmm. I mean, if the bay rises 2 feet, which it's going to, probably maybe not in our lifetime, but certainly in our children's lifetimes, those kind of mitigations are not going to be effective. So is the assumption that if we are proposing sites that will invariably raise those issues, that there will be money available to build berms and other sea level rise mitigation measures to prevent those houses or those housing developments from being completely inundated?
If I may, Mayor Haroff, I appreciate this question. I do feel like we're getting into the weeds a little bit about particular sites. And with our mapping process at this point. I think we're looking at preferences, and we'll definitely be talking specifically about sites as we move forward. But I do see that Gabe Paulson's hand is raised, and he hasn't had a chance yet to speak. And our next 45, well, now 40 minutes is intended to be dedicated to letting the public at large ask questions. We highly value the questions being asked, and we'll definitely come to you at the next steering committee meeting with robust information for these kinds of questions that you're asking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Andy. Gabe here. I'll keep my two questions very brief. One is, I'm curious if there was a site, I think the Ross Valley Sanitation District, I don't know if that was included or if I'm confusing something, but is that still considered a potential site on the balance tool or at all in this process? And then
Absolutely.
It is. Okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah, and the second question, we started with Lee's discussion of equity, and I thought maybe it would close the circle for me to tie together a little bit about the tool and the process, which I know is site evaluation, but I think it would make sense to say, what HCD might be looking for, or what your recommendations are from the equity first position. How does that fit in? Because the only thing I really see is affordability. Like if we try to hit a target of hitting the more affordable and very affordable homes, but maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Sure, I can say that Larkspur is a highest resource area entirely. So on some level, there's less. That would mean that for affordable housing to be placed anywhere in Larkspur, that we would be increasing integration generally, and so that's a plus. But we have the benefit of Veronica Tam working with us through the Marin County Collaborative, and she will be looking at the sites that we select and giving us some guidance about equity related to specific amenities and all of the research that she's doing and the qualifiers that she's engaging with in her analysis that we'll be bringing forward to the public and to the steering committee. I just didn't want to bring to her this enormous list that we're starting with, but we will be incorporating her feedback as we move through the process.
Okay, so more to come, and thank you for that.
Absolutely, thank you. So this is from our experience, sort of the most exciting part of our workshop, keeping in mind that mapping program is intended to be a workshop that carries forward for the next month. So we're hoping to hear from everyone, and we want to make sure you have enough time to be engaged and involved, and we'll carry forward all of those comments that we receive, again, both through the website and all of the web pages and the mapping program itself, the housing simulator. And right now I'm going to bring Kristen Masters back into the floor here. And Kristen, if you could go over some of the ground rules before we start answering questions from the public at large, that'd be great.
Great. So these are pretty simple. We really want to encourage you to speak from your own experience, not speak for others, to share with brevity, because we want to make room for as many people as possible. And if you know that you often get your questions answered, then maybe you could kind of move back and let other people step forward first. That's an equity concept as well. Try to listen for understanding of what matters to a speaker. That's what we're going to try to do, and we want to encourage you to do that as you're listening to others and as you're framing your own question, because we aim for an atmosphere that's respectful of everybody's dignity. It can be really hard when you're already frustrated about something and you think you haven't been heard. Then sometimes we don't hold each other's dignity with as much care as we'd like to. So now we will start hearing some questions live from the public.
So now would be the time for me to remind the public that this is where your raise hand function will really come into play. So your raise hand is at the bottom center of the screen. And I did get some feedback that I'm going a little too fast when I discuss these details. So I'm just going to repeat it again there. I do understand I do that. The raise hand function is in the bottom center of your screen. When you click that, a little raised hand will go to the side and I will know that you wish to speak. Thank you. And I see we do have 2 people already. Shall I go ahead and... All right, I'm going to unmute David. David, you are the first to talk. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, great. Yes, my name is David Hare. I live in Drake's Cove, right next to the proposed Oak Hill site. And just I put this in the Q&A, so it's there for people who've been scrolling through. My concern with almost half, 450 to 500 of the RENA requirements being low income or very low income, those units are typically built by nonprofit organizations such as Eden that's doing Oak Hill, and they're exempt from property taxes. So I just want to throw that out there. Is someone with the city doing the financial planning necessary to make sure that services don't get overstretched, because all these units need the same sort of fire, police, and other city services that that every other household needs, but they're not, the tax base isn't there for it. So I just want to know if the mayor or anyone else had been thinking about that issue.
Thank you, David. Since we at EMC can't speak directly to that, we're going to hold that question and bring it forward and incorporate it in with our FAQs potentially, or with a Q&A follow-on to this meeting. So please stay engaged, and we hope that your question will get answered in the near future.
Could I just add one thing about that, Andy, just as like a general about this? The housing element is the city creating room or space for the housing to be created, but individual developments will still have to go through their own approval process. And depending on their location, like you're saying, they will have to, the city at that time will need to allocate specific services for that location and that quantity of units. At this level, we're just trying to put we're just trying to help the city allocate the number of units that we're not saying specifically that these are going to be built. That will come down the road along with all of the services.
Thank you, David.
All right, our next question will be from Mahler. Mahler, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Robin Mahler. You actually have 2 of us. So you're going to get 2 questions if you don't mind. Mine is actually a comment. When we were waiting for the webinar to start, I was thinking about sites that I thought that came to mind, and 2 that you haven't mentioned, and I'm interested in hearing what you're thinking about them is, or just to add them to your list if there's some reason to, is the whole area of the Barcelino and Big 5 properties, which seemed like an area to be considered. And the other is, I'm aware that City Hall is thinking about relocating to the Rose Lane property. And does that mean that the City Hall property becomes available? So is that another property? That's it. But here's David with his, or you want to comment on that? And then don't forget, David has a question.
Well, thank you. This is exactly what's great about public participation, is that we hear new, fresh ideas. We will look into those sites and get back to you. And as far as City Hall, there was a little bit of discussion we had, David, with Neil about what might be possible at the City Hall site. I think we have still included it within the mapping, at least at this stage. So we'd love to hear back from the public. But as far as it being adaptively reused, that would be difficult. Is that what I recall, David?
Yeah, it would be a challenge. It's possible, but it's challenging.
All right, so this is David Mahler, the second part of the Mahlers here. And I have two comments, both pretty brief. The first one, I've become recently aware that there's a state mandate for local jurisdictions to adopt objective design standards. And I'm just wondering how that objective design standards process fits in with this housing element process. And then the second comment, and I realize this may be more appropriate to the policy focused meeting, but I'm going to bring it up probably every one of these meetings, is I want to make sure that every one of these developments under the RENA requirements is all electric. I'm well aware that by 2026, that the 2025 state code cycle, building code cycle, will probably require all new construction to be all electric, but between now and then, that's not the case. And so one way or another, I want to make sure that all of these developments are all electric for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, that's the focus of it. And I was particularly interested in the Oak Hill development, seeing how apparently far advanced that is. I mean, you guys showed a rendering of that, and I have no clue if the developer of that is contemplating an all-electric development. There's been a couple of recently proposed pretty major developments here in Marin County. We've worked with the developers to make sure they are committed to all-electric, but it's just such a vital thing not to continue to install gas appliances. We want to make sure everything new is all-electric.
Thank you for that, David. This is also a great example of why this public process, I think, is so beneficial. We want to hear about the things that are important and that are valued by Larkspur residents, so that when we get to talking about policies and programs, that can get integrated, so that this ends up being an opportunity to make sure that the vision going forward is aligned with Larkspur goals and values. As far as the state mandate for odds, it's definitely in a city's best interest to have objective development and design standards in place, because more and more there is a consequence for many different processes for as we rezone and as we put the sites inventory together. It is absolutely in the city's best interest to have this as a backup for those sites that may lose discretionary ability. So if through a discretionary process we come up with those objective development and design standards specifically to these sites that we together want to see housing come to be, then through that process, you'll be able to affect the built environment. David, do you want to speak to this a little bit too?
Well, I think the only thing I would say, is that design standards do generally provide a clear path to development. And I believe that the County of Marin has, taken a step forward in creating that large packet of design standards that's designed to be tailored by community. So some of the work has already been started.
Thank you.
And our next question will be from MT. MT?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having the ability for the public to come and have some comments on this. So I've been a long time, actually born and raised in California. I've been living in Marin for a really long time, and I have huge concerns over the fact that somewhere in the very small town of Larkspur, 1,000 houses potentially could be built. I mean, I don't know where in the world you're expecting to put this. Has anyone thought about the traffic considerations? I've seen numerous small towns like Petaluma, out in the East Bay, Pleasanton, some of those small towns which have been inundated with condos and apartments that have basically choked the small town atmosphere and have destroyed those cities. And I'm really concerned that, first of all, you're going to be building on protected land here in Marin. Larkspur is a very small community, and people like living here because of that fact. We're close to nature. It's very quaint and quiet. So, I mean, adding 1,000 new homes potentially in a very small area will not only clog the traffic, it will drain the resources. It's going to basically choke this small community. And I honestly don't know how people are even considering this idea. It's, even though it's state mandated apparently, but is no one pushing back against the state? I mean, I just feel like this is like the worst location to put this many places in. And now you're talking about building up the waterways to protect from sea damage. Okay, well, that's great, but you're just going to destroy the environment in the process. So I just feel like there are a lot of considerations that people are not taking into account, and you will destroy Marin and the beauty that it has, especially like people living in the small community. People like the fact that it's small, it's quaint, it's close to nature. It's not the East Bay. The East Bay has been overrun with people and condos and apartments. They just keep building on every single little piece of land. So why in the world would you want to turn
MT,
Marin?
can I reflect a little bit back, because it's coming kind of rapidly and there's a lot there. So I hear a couple of concerns, and I just want to check those before you get any answer from someone. One is that you're worried about where these things are going to go, and I'm guessing that you've been on the call to see some of what those sites are. But even with seeing where the sites are, that there's a lot of concern about traffic and density and maybe your small town feel getting lost by the addition of housing for people who need housing in all the places in the Bay Area. Is that part of it? Just like that this builds up this kind of sense of worry that your home is going to be impacted?
Well, also on the flyer, you were asking property owners to give up their land to build on. Like, how can you ask someone who's worked really hard to afford a very nice house in this area to all of a sudden, carve out a chunk for affordable housing? And how are you determining quote unquote affordable housing too? I mean, are people going to be going through some sort of application process? I mean, there are so many questions, and I just feel like people aren't really sure. It's all nice to have like housing for everyone, but you know what? In reality, that doesn't really work. And you have to like take into account all of these other things. And I don't know. I don't know if maybe I'm the only one who has these concerns, and that's fine. But I think you were the only concerns, and I can't be the only one that's had these worries.
Yeah, MT, I just want to reflect back. It doesn't matter whether you're the only person who has concerns, but I hear them as being pretty strong and kind of on top of one another. So we're trying to catch the layers that are there for you so that we can actually answer the questions instead of just, glossing over anything. So is there a particular part of that you really want? Because there were a lot of different pieces, and I want Andy or David to have a chance to respond to something that you're particularly worried about, because you named.
Sure. I guess my most
8 or 10.
Yes, I did have a lot to say, and I appreciate you letting me speak. I think my biggest concern is maintaining Marin and especially Larkspur for what it is, right? It's small town, beautiful, up next to Mount Tam. How in the world are you going to be able to maintain that sort of feel when you're forcing 1,000 new homes into areas that probably they weren't built on for a reason, whether they be right next to the waterways or what have you. But I just feel like that has not been taken into consideration, at least not that I've been hearing. So I would love to have someone kind of think about that.
So I do want to just reflect the word forcing back, because this, and Andy will have a much more articulate answer of where this comes from and what the considerations are that have each community looking at how to increase housing. It wasn't specific to Larkspur being forced to do this. But having said that, I'll see if Andy wants to add.
It's true that it's a statewide concern that housing hasn't been built much in the last couple of decades. So we're at a deficit. There's a lot more need than there is surplus. Anyone who's looked for a place to rent or buy recently would know that all too well. And well, I do want to clarify about what might have been on a flyer. Maybe what you were mentioning is the letter that we sent out to for those who are property owners on this list. We wanted to check in and see if there was a property owner interest or a clear disinterest. Because if there's a clear disinterest on a particular site to be redeveloped, we'd rather maybe put our energies somewhere else. That they're
well, it's a property interest. I mean, the state, you know, the state isn't going to come in and develop the houses without someone's consent on their property. It is simply, there are a number of property owners and communities that are interested in developing it for housing for a variety of personal reasons. And if they have interest, here's an opportunity.
And just to be clear about, I do want to make sure that anyone owning a single family home knows that this invitation is open to them as well. While MT, you may not, as a property owner, may not be interested in developing an extra unit on your site. There may well be those who do. Even they may want to develop a unit on their site that may house someone who will care for them, or maybe their children. And there's opportunities now to even enable owner equity to be built up with the SB9 project. And for every property owner that does fill out a property owner interest form specifically to build something that would be enabled by SB9, those get counted one for one. That automatically takes from 979. We then have 978. So there are opportunities for people to make a difference for themselves, for their family, for their needs, and for the community needs, if they so desire. And Lee, I see you unmuting. Please contribute.
Thank you. You know, I just wanted to say, thank you, first of all, for sharing that perspective, MK. I think that when I'm sorry, MT, I think that earlier when we spoke about the caring piece, right? Equity and the caring for our neighbors and for our communities, I think we can hold both ends, because I heard you saying things, I mean, the things you were there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of feeling and emotion, and that's totally fine, that's important, right? And I heard some things around, you know, we work really hard to have this thing and someone's going to come in and take it, or something's going to threaten that in some way. And I just want to reiterate what we talked about earlier with the equity piece, that we will be having some challenging conversations, right, about what it does mean to care for community, to care for neighbors, to care for other people, right? And sometimes that does put our own resources in jeopardy, right? Whatever that looks like. So we do have an opportunity to have a conversation about, like maybe someone has worked really hard for what they have, and what it means to be in community, and sometimes what it means to look out for other people. And sometimes, and I know you probably know this, but again, I appreciate what you said, and we're taking all that into consideration, and we're going to have this conversation about what it means to be equitable and what it means to take care of each other, just for lack of a better way to put it, because that's what we have to do at this time. So thank you for your comments, and I look forward to more conversations about that.
Thank you, Lee. If I may, just one more point to add, because this just feels so rich. And I lived in the Seattle area where things got developed very quickly, and we would go to an intersection that we were so familiar with for 20 years, and it was completely changed. So I can understand that fear of things suddenly becoming unrecognizable. But I can say this, that Larkspur has done an impeccable job of sort of masking the density that you hold today. There's nearly half of the residents in Larkspur are multifamily, but most anyone that I mention that to, they can't believe it, because you've been able to tuck in a lot of your large buildings behind hills and around corners, and we'd like to continue to perpetuate that design ethos that has made Larkspur special in the way that it is. And that's why we've got David on board with us. And that's why we want to be included in discussions about objective development and design standards and make sure that they really resonate with what the community has built up until now. And so that the future, there might be a few more people living among you, but we want to make sure it still feels like Larkspur. We're not, that's our job. It's our job, but we need to hear from you. You can help us make it come true. And I think I see we've got 6 more people with raised hands. We'd love to hear from others as well.
We do. Next on the list is Kevin Carroll. Kevin.
Good evening. 2 questions really, and I asked them both in the chat. And one said it was going to be answered later, and that's kind of the bigger concern to me, and that is if not enough low-income housing units are built in this upcoming cycle, and we have an instance right now where there's 400 units at Skylark, the 89 units over here at Mobile Home Park, over 500 units, rents are going up considerably faster than the cost of living. Our low-income tenants, particularly seniors on Social Security, are being forced out and being replaced by double income or triple income households. That's going to lower the number of existing.
Kevin, we seem to have lost you. Your mic may have dropped. Kevin, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There. I'm sorry. I think we missed the last part of your statement.
Okay, so my question is if current low-income tenants, particularly seniors on Social Security, are forced out of Larkspur and are replaced by double and triple income families, what happens to that RHNA number in 8 years? Does it double or get bigger? Or, how does that affect it? And then the second question was the one I asked in the chat about the older commercial parts of Larkspur. Zone 1 and 4 were built at a time when shop owners lived above or behind their businesses. And over the years, many of these spaces have been converted to commercial rentals. Could Larkspur pass zoning regulations encouraging or requiring them to be converted back to housing? And would these be counted as new units? Thank you.
Well, David, I'll start, but please chime in. The quick answer about the apartments over commercial, any new unit gets counted, absolutely.
That's right.
And I hear also about some fear maybe about what would happen with the upcoming cycle. One thing we know is that ABAG considers what is built with each cycle when they put together their allocation for the next one. And what we're trying to do, we want to help position Larkspur to be recipients for grant funding so that low and very low housing can get built in this next 8-year cycle. We want to put you to the best advantage, set you up so that when you come into the 7th cycle housing element update, excuse me, that you are successful, and that translates to not needing to rely entirely on inclusionary housing. David, I'm going to let you go.
Well, I think I don't have too much else to add other than to say that, construction costs are really high right now, and building low-income housing is extremely challenging. It does take a lot of grants, but if you have existing spaces like you're talking about over shops, that can be a more economical way in some cases to bring housing to market, and there are great opportunities if you can find them.
And I believe that answers that question. Our next up is Skylark Tenants Association. Please go ahead and let us know what's on your mind. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, hi there.
Hi, thank you.
Sorry, it took a minute because I had to go behind the windows. My name is Jockey, and I'm the president of the Skylark, newly formed Skylark Tenants Association. Thank you guys so much first for the team. I forget, Andy, David, Kristen, Lee, gosh, you guys are amazing. Your empathy touched us because, to be honest with you, when we attended a meeting last week that was very apathetic, that we didn't feel like we were heard. So we really appreciate you recognizing right from the beginning that there's a lot of people who are scared, a lot of people who are worried, and also just leading with equity, because we represent what equity means in Larkspur. And from last week's city council meeting, they did a survey. This consulting group did a survey, and one of the things that Larkspur scored the lowest out of anybody that they've polled was the affordability of living in Larkspur. And they polled it was really low. Percentage was super, super low. I forget what those numbers are. So I am speaking on behalf of the Tenants Association because we have a crisis in our hands. And the crisis is we represent a utopian, would say, community, let's say. We are naturally occurring affordable housing up here. There's families, people who work in tech. There's a naturally occurring retirement community up here. There's a lot of seniors. We also have some Section 8 housing people who have who are on housing provisions that live here. And I can tell you this, for the people who are concerned about how your communities are going to be affected, I encourage you to come and drive up to Skylark. It is beautiful, it is green, it is gorgeous, it is set up on a hill, and that it is possible to actually have those two communities live together. There's a group of condos that are just down the hill, and their value is just as much. So we represent that. And I have a couple of questions and then a comment. Our question is kind of what Carroll, I think, had mentioned earlier, is we believe that you can probably satisfy more than half of this RHNA requirement by designating Skylark as an affordable community, which it already is. And I think mandated those numbers would be filled anyway. That's the question is, would the numbers that are already existing at Skylark, if they're protected and if they're provided, or would they count towards those RHNA numbers? The other thing that I have is just a comment, because I know members of the City Council who also sit on the steering committee are sitting in on this meeting. So I'd like to just pose this to them, because last week when we attended the meeting, we had 10 written public comments that were addressing this very thing that were sent in advance, and 3 that were made verbally at the meeting. And honestly, they were ignored. They were received with quite the apathy, and we've written severally to the email that we were given for the county clerk's office, and we haven't received any responses from any of our council members regarding the issue that we brought up last week. And what we are facing up here at Skylark is we are facing displacement, and we're facing displacement with statewide evictions that are ending next week. And most of us are in fear of being forced out of our homes, because recently Prime Finance, who bought Skylark Apartments, who's a financial firm, they're going to be raising our rents after only 2.5 months of ownership. So we're worried that without these statewide protections for eviction protections that are going to be ending, and new raises in our rents, we're not going to be able to live here. So we're just simply asking and calling on the city officials. And I don't know how this committee and this steering community forum can help us, is that we're requesting that the city and the officials enact an urgent eviction moratorium in Larkspur. This is just to give us some time as we're thinking through what it is that we can do to protect us, and to give us some equity as middle to lower income people that go to work every day, that contribute to the taxes of this community, that have lived here. Some of us have lived here 37 years, 6 years, 12 years, 13 years. We're long-term residents. The second thing that we're asking for is to we're really counting on the city of Larkspur to enact and explore some permanent solutions for renters here, like rent stabilization, just cause for evictions, and anti-harassment ordinances, which a lot of us have faced, and a right to counsel when we come up with these issues. And of course, the third one is just to designate Skylark as an affordable community. So we come to this committee to bring this to record, that in as much as other community owners are concerned about these new places, there's people like us. We represent over 400 units, almost 1,000 people live here. And I think we're also an important part of this community. And we would like to continue working here. We would like to continue living here. So that is all I had to say. And you guys are welcome to, if you're able to address those questions, we'd really appreciate it. If there's any of those council members on the call, again, I'm speaking on behalf of the association, which is representing quite a few of us, over 150 of us. If you're able to actually address some of these questions, that would be fantastic. Thank you guys so much for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to begin by just saying, as consultants to the city, we don't want to put the steering committee on point at this moment, but we do know from the county that there's a big encouragement to include anti-displacement policies with all housing element updates throughout Marin County. It's recognized as a huge equity point that we all need to focus our energy on. So we'll be bringing that through and helping to educate the steering committee about opportunities for bringing these policies forward. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen overnight, which it sounds like timing wise, you know, that would be essential for you. So I don't want to put the steering committee in the hot seat at this moment, but I will certainly be working with them behind the scenes to help them understand and to learn together with them what might be possible in being responsive to you. I also want to open the floor to David Lee and Kristen.
Yeah, I just want to jump in really quickly and just say thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing all that felt, all the fears, all of the feelings. And I've said that a couple of times now, right? I've for folks who are speaking and talking about what they're feeling. And that goes back again to the equity work and the caring piece, right? Like this conversation, so we can find out what everyone's needs are. Because if it comes down to it, everybody wants to be safe, everyone wants to have housing, everyone wants to feel comfortable, everyone wants to have space and home, right? We are all different, and maybe we're coming from different lived experiences and different positionalities, and there's a place there in the middle. There's a place there in the middle, and we get to figure that out and find it. So I just thank you all again for the questions you've put in the chat, for sharing yourselves and your fears and your concerns with us here. It's what we need to hear. Thank you.
And I just want to say transparently, there are still hands up, and we're coming down toward the end of our time on this meeting, and there are ways that you can put your questions and your comments into the suggestion box it's in the chat. This isn't the end of your opportunity to give input and to have your voice be heard.
Do we have time for any more questions, or are we moving on?
With 2 minutes left, I think we need to wrap up.
Then I just want to reconfirm that you do still have an opportunity, and it will be the comment box on the website, and the link to that is in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamala. And we'd like to redirect and share this slide with everyone. If you'd like to contribute towards what our shared goals are, please be sure to share suggestions on the website as well. But these are our goals that we've started with. our shared goals for the housing element update. We want to, in the end, present a document that represents Larkspur's core values, Larkspur's vision for future housing, that creates a more inclusive Larkspur community, and that meets regional and state mandated housing goals. We'd love to see a show of hands for those who that resonates with. Thank you for raising your hand. I see it growing, and I appreciate that. And we're really looking forward to working with you. As Kristen said, this isn't the end, this is just the beginning. And the website is going to be a portal for us to communicate together and to be able to record that so that we can share what we learn with our decision makers as we move through the process. Every word that you share will be brought through that decision-making process. We'll be able to contribute directly to the decision-making that takes place throughout this process. Thank you to everybody who took the time this evening to share in this workshop. And this is a month-long workshop. Please take the time to learn more about the mapping tool, the housing simulator. If you've got questions about how to use that, we do have a how-to guide right on that page. And we encourage you to ask us any questions that you may have beyond that. Anybody like to do a last shout out?
I think you want to do the live poll at the end again. How confident do you feel about your knowledge of the housing element process, update process now?
You may have been watching us today in full screen. If you cannot find our poll box, use the escape key on your keyboard. It will make it a little bit smaller and you'll be able to kind of hunt around and you should find a poll that says confidence. How confident do you feel about your knowledge of the housing element update process? Are you confident, somewhat confident, or unsure? I do see a few more people are finding it. We'll give you another 3 to 5 seconds here. And it looks like it's starting to level off. We will be closing the poll in 3 seconds. It will be 3, 2, and 1. I'm ending the poll. And there are our results. We are finding people feeling more confident, 36%. 23% are feeling somewhat confident, and 41% are still unsure.
A lot of complexities, and I wouldn't doubt it if some people joining tonight became a little less confident because there is so much to learn. But we'll walk this path with you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. So please do let us know what you're thinking and feeling.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to direct your attention one last time, please, to the final screen. We would like you to follow up on www.livinglarkspur.com. If you're on the phone, that's www.livinglarkspur.com. Thank you very much for joining us today. This concludes our webinar.